Very happy to be here today. For those folks who don't know, our province, Newfoundland and Labrador, is undergoing a bit of a review of our municipal system, currently about to start tonight, actually, starting 22 public consultations on regional approaches to municipal government. So we're very happy to be participating in this webinar. We were very happy to participate in the webinar a month or so ago, looking at the Quebec system and its impact on rural communities. So as Monique has said, we've got three eminent panelists with us. Brian Walliser is a retired executive director of policy and research for the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing with the government of British Columbia. He's going to be up first. After Brian is Dr. Robert Bish, professor emeritus from the University of Victoria, where he was a professor of public administration and economics. He's also currently the academic chair of the board of the Tulo Center of Indigenous Economics, and widely known across Canada, North America, and the world on his expertise on regional government and regional approaches. And last but not least, Dr. Kelly Vaughan, who is the Associate Vice President of Research and Graduate Studies at the Grenfell campus of Memorial University of Newfoundland. So we're going to start with Brian's presentation.
So this was what I was asked to do, which was to give an overview of British Columbia's regional district system, and I've subtitled it, How BC Has Filled a Gap in the Fabric of Local Government in the 1960s. The topics I'm going to cover very briefly, just a short background and history of the RD system, what the system looks like today. I'd like to go into a case study of one regional district, the Columbia Shuswap RD, which I selected as being, I think, particularly applicable to the circumstances of Newfoundland, and finish with a few key observations about the system. So why did we end up with a regional district system? Partly it's a question of geography in British Columbia, partly it was a question of governance. British Columbia is a large province, very mountainous. 95% of the territory is uninhabited. We have evolved a very linear settlement pattern with towns stretched out mostly in river valleys. The Columbia River, the Fraser Valley, most prominently up in the north, the Nechako and Skeena rivers, all of them have a string of towns inside them. Only 1% of the land territory of British Columbia is municipalized. And what that means is that there is a fair amount of rural, non-municipal population in BC. The population in the 1960s of rural British Columbia was somewhere in the vicinity of 15 to 20%. Most of those people, I'll hasten to add, were congregated just outside of municipal boundaries, but generally, as I said before, stretched in and around river valleys. The governance side of the question was dominated by the fact that British Columbia has no and had never had any form of a county system in place. And with 1% of the land mass municipalized, the other 99% of British Columbia territory was actually under direct provincial administration in the early 1960s. You can imagine that all sorts of problems would arise in this situation with a remote provincial government trying to provide street services, protective services, and so on and so forth into many parts of British Columbia, there were, problems with infrastructure provision, infrastructure that needed to span larger territory. There were problems in providing interlocal and rural services, and an awful lot of pressure on the province to fill service gaps and resolve conflicts. What this amounted to was, there was a gap in the fabric of local governance, and the government in the 1960s, decided to act on that. But it turns out, I'm not going to go over this chart in detail, but it turns out that, the notion of regionalism in British Columbia got its start as early as the 1920s in Greater Vancouver. In the 1920s, there were a couple of intermunicipal single-purpose utility boards set up in Greater Vancouver. This was kind of a conventional response to problems of local organization, where you had, multiple jurisdictions and the need for overarching services. A conventional response was to set up a body that can span multiple municipalities and provide for a single thing, a water district, a sewer district, that sort of thing. So that was in the 1920s, the 1930s and 40s. There were some more joint boards set up for single purposes like libraries, regional parks, etc. But it wasn't until the 1950s that the questions of, intermunicipal service provision really got a start. And they got a start when a person known as Ev Brown was appointed deputy minister. That was in 1954. And alongside the minister of the day, Ev Brown, began a dialogue with local governments in BC about the architecture of the BC local government system, the fact that we had numerous municipalities, the need for overarching services, no mechanism to provide those services, and the need for a better scheme for providing rural services in British Columbia, which at the time was under direct provincial administration. A lot of things happened in the intervening years. Ev Brown spent, I gather from the research that we've done, a lot of time working on this issue, engaging with municipalities, engaging with the Union of BC Municipalities, kiting different proposals, so on and so forth. It took him fully a decade, until 1964, before he ended up with a solution that he thought was going to work in a British Columbia context. And this was the notion of self-organized, multi-purpose federations of municipalities to deal with the issues that were being left undone under the current system of governance. Interestingly, the solution in 1964, in some respects, bore the imprint of the solution that was decided on in the 1920s. This notion of self-organized service districts. What he added was the notion that a self-organized service district could undertake multiple purposes in a regional federation. And that was the basis of the legislation that was written in 1965 for regional districts. The legislation was in 1965. Implementation of the regional district concept took place between 1965 and 1968. Ev Brown retired in 1970. He started his career in municipal affairs in 1947 when he was appointed as the secretary to a Royal Commission on Municipal Affairs. By my count, Ev Brown worked on the problem of regional governance in British Columbia for the better part of a quarter century. Hence the title of the slide, Resolve, Ingenuity, Perseverance. This is the regional system, regional district system as it looks today. In 2017, there are 28 regional districts. The map in 2017 looks an awful lot like the map that existed in 1968. There's been a few changes. A couple of regional districts have been split in two. A couple of regional districts have been merged. A couple of regional districts have had their boundaries extended or changed. But by and large, the map of 2017 resembles the map that existed in 1968 when the system was finally rolled out. Now, the slide is called The Strategy of Gentle Imposition. Regional districts were not imposed on any part of British Columbia. They were, in fact, voluntarily created by the municipalities which make up each of the regions. And you can see that the process of incorporating regions actually took, the better part of 4 years to complete. The regional districts were formed voluntarily, but that doesn't mean that the province or the provincial government was an idle bystander, because in fact, the provincial government worked assiduously during that 4-year period to see to the filling out of the regional district map. And so the strategy of gentle imposition is a catchphrase that was included in an article by a UBCM academic who was, watching the implementation of the system. And what it is a reflection of the provincial government's approach to the creation of the system, not by imposition, in effect, though, by negotiation, if you will. And just while we're looking at the map, I'm going to be doing a case study of the Columbia Shuswap regional district later on, and I just wanted to show you in context where that regional district is located. Now, the regional district system today, we can describe it in terms of population. There's a few one very large regional district, 5 sizable regional districts. Most regional districts, though, are in the 25 to 100,000 population range. The median population of a regional district is about 60,000 persons. I will say, though, that more than 2/3 of the BC population resides in just 3 large regional districts, all of them located in the lower southwest corner of British Columbia. And the other thing to note is that every regional district has a rural, non-municipal population of some size. Most regional, or the median value of the non-municipal population in a regional district is about 30%. In terms of territory, regional districts are quite large. We've got 2 of them that are larger than the island of Newfoundland itself. They're both in the far north of British Columbia. Most of our regional districts are larger than the Avalon Peninsula, and by my reckoning, the median area of a regional district is about twice the size of the Avalon Peninsula. So they're quite large in territory, not very large in population, but now. Yes.
You got about 5 or 6 minutes left.
5 roles of regional districts. We can describe them in terms of the territorial flexibility of regions. They supply local services at a sub-regional scale. That would be services like water and street lighting to local areas. They also are engaged in creating partnerships between local areas. So partnerships that would connect services between town and countryside. They can also operate at a regional scale, either within the regional district to capture scale economies or do things like harmonize regulations between local areas. Regional districts can also connect with one another to supply regional scale services at a multi-regional level. And finally, a very important role of the regional district is to provide contract services to members. This is something that small municipalities in particular are advantaged by because they can have the benefits of being a municipality, to have independent decision-making power over services, but they can look to a larger government, the regional district, to actually provide services to them under contract as opposed to having to do the services themselves. Regional districts are composed of both municipal directors and rural directors. The rural directors are elected directly to serve on the regional district board for 4-year terms. Municipal directors are appointed from and by municipal councils. Once a board is formed, a chair of the board is chosen by election from amongst the either the elected or the appointed directors. Voting is fairly complicated. What we have built into the BC legislation is a scheme that results in representation by population. I won't go into a lot of detail, but essentially all members of the regional district are given a number of votes that is related to their population size. And, so a municipality may be, if a large municipality may have, 20, 30, or 40 votes allocated to it. From the number of votes that a municipality or a member has, there is a rule that results in a number of directors that are allocated to a member. Each director may wield multiple votes. So we call it a weighted ballot. A long story short is that representation by population is built into the system. I'll just leave it at that and move on to the question of how services are organized. This is an illustration of how flexibly regional districts operate. When a region decides to implement a service, and bear in mind that this is a decision that can be taken at any time. Regions are self-organizing. They have the ability to create a new service to deal with a new problem at any point in time. And in fact, regions have been creating services over the entire 50 years of their existence, one by one, year by year. The process that they go through is a three-part process. It's deciding what part of a service or function that they want to implement. Using a water service as an example, most regional districts decide to take on the responsibility for wholesaling water to municipal members, not retailing the water, not delivering water to the property line, but delivering wholesale water to the municipality. They don't typically deal with the entire water service, in other words. The second question they have to deal with is to define a service area, and you can see that the four scales of service that can be provided: local, interlocal, regional, multi-regional. The third question they have to decide is the service mode, whether to provide services directly, to provide services through what we call public contracting, whether to engage private contracting in service provision, or in fact to create autonomous entities to undertake services. The 16 cells you see on this chart are filled with examples, real-world examples of how different regional districts have supplied different kinds of services in each one of those sort of scale and mode cells, if you will. So I'll just move on to the case study. This is the Columbia Shuswap Regional District in East Central British Columbia, population about 50,000, rural population near 40%, not growing very fast. It's a large area, about 3 times the size of the Avalon Peninsula, 10 members, 4 municipalities, 6 rural members. You can see them, they're called electoral areas, A, B, C, D, E, and F. The region is involved in the provision of about 100 different services to its members. Its budget represents about 25% of the spending of all local governments in the Columbia Shuswap region, and it operates with a staff of about 50 people. There are 4 municipalities. There's no really dominant municipalities. Salmon Arm on Shuswap Lake is the largest of them, 18,000 people. And the 6 rural areas together represent about 20,000 people. Now, because every regional district is self-organizing in BC, every regional district has acquired what we call a distinct service personality, which is a function of many factors. The local government culture in the area, certainly geography, so on and so forth. In this region, it is a region that in many ways exists despite its geography. It's split in by 3 different mountain ranges. As a result, this is a region that has decided on its own that providing region-wide services really didn't make a lot of sense. And Columbia Shuswap has therefore adopted a strategy of building strong sub-regional services, essentially sub-regional services built around the 4 existing municipalities. So I'm going to look at 3 different services very quickly.
Ryan, we got about 2 minutes.
One is a service that has been exists because of a long established consensus. In recreation, the region has focused a lot of attention on building recreation services in conjunction with the 4 cities. And it has a goal of lowering costs, improving service, and fairer cost sharing. And so moving on to fire safety, a consensus has more recently developed that there was a need in the region to improve fire safety. The region is responsible for 13 different fire departments, plus 3 town regional district partnership agreements to provide fire services to, they say, 95% of the residents in the region. The new consensus that is building is to deal with problems in water supply. BC has a very fragmented system of water delivery, and the regional district in this case has determined that it has a role to play in overcoming the fragmentation of service delivery, professionalizing the delivery of water to residents, and raising service quality. Rushing through to an end, I just want to note a couple of things about the regional district system. There are some ancillary institutions that are crucial to its success. We need a reliable assessment system to ensure that who gets services and who pays services is matched together. We're fortunate in BC because we have a province-wide assessment system, and it makes the financial side of the regional district system possible for us. We can create service areas in any territory of British Columbia and create an assessment base of any size or shape that will enable us to fund an individual service quite successfully. 2 other things that are very critical to the system. One is the Municipal Finance Authority of BC, which is a scheme whereby every local government in BC borrows money through a pooled debt financing scheme, the MFA, and it enables local governments, large and small, to take advantage of the MFA's AAA rating in the debt market. The other thing that's happened in BC is a creation of a pooled self-insurance scheme for local governments. It's called the Municipal Insurance Association of BC. So these are ancillary institutions that help make the regional district system work. 2 final slides. Just reflecting on the regional district system, it has helped us in British Columbia to avoid the pressure to consolidate local governments that many other provinces have faced. In British Columbia, we have tackled issues one by one. We've solved service issues one by one. We've focused on service priorities and put them to rest. And we've introduced the scheme of public contracting to help small municipal and non-municipal communities stay independent and yet successful. So all of these things have reduced the pressure to merge or amalgamate municipalities. The creation of the regional district system has tended to foster a spirit of cooperation between local areas. This has also helped reduce interlocal friction and so on and so forth. Concluding observations, The regional district system, self-organizing, and is designed for continuous evolution. So every year, one regional district or another will, sort of reinvent itself, create new services, solve new problems. They do this on their own without provincial direction. The regional district has reduced the costs of creating local partnerships. It does that because the legislation provides a simple and easy method for members of the regional district to get together and solve problems jointly. It's something that in other provinces, their attempts to create interlocal services are arrested, stopped in their tracks by the huge costs of negotiating partnerships, from scratch each time that you have to do it. The regional district system has enabled the professionalization of service delivery, even in small and remote settings. Even the most rural community can get, professionals involved in service delivery on their behalf by resorting to, the regional district supply of the services. We like to define regions as regions on tap, not on top. Regions aren't set apart from the municipal system. They are in fact tightly integrated with it. They're not apart from the system, they are a part of it. And the provincial role has been critical, but it is the Department of Local Government has been a facilitative actor, not a directive actor. We don't interfere, we don't direct, we don't force. But at the same time, the local government department is not absent. They are working assiduously to improve the system year over year. And the last point I want to make is that the Local Government Association in BC, the Union of BC Municipalities, has also played a very vital role in the regional district system. They were integral to the founding of the Municipal Finance Authority and the Insurance Association, and they have an important role in education programming as well. So that's the end of what I had prepared.
Thank you very much, Brian. An awful lot of information there. If anybody has a question for Brian, like I said, click the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. That'll pop your question directly to me, and I can pass it on to Brian. And in the meantime, I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind. We've got about 10, 15 minutes or so for questions. You mentioned the rural representatives that are elected to regional districts. So the folks that are living in, I presume, non-municipal or unincorporated places.
Correct.
Are there guidelines for the constituency size? How many of these communities band together to elect a person to sit on the regional district board, or is it up to every regional district to set their own?
The internal boundaries of a regional district is a provincial. Ultimately a provincial decision. We create the boundaries of municipalities by provincial regulation. We create the internal boundaries of a regional district rural area by provincial regulation as well. How the boundaries were determined initially back in the 1960s, I'm not altogether certain, but I think essentially the decision-making process was to look at a individual municipality and look at the basically the commuter shed, if you will, from that municipality, And I think in most cases that kind of notion is what led to the internal boundaries of a regional district. But ultimately, the decision on what those boundaries are is codified in a provincial regulation.
And is there a discussion at that time about sort of balance of influence? So the number of seats that would be held by folks who are directly related versus municipalities?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And again, this all took place before my time. I don't actually know the answer to that, whether there was discussion about that kind of a balance. What I do know is that we have regional districts today where that balance is quite varied. So we have some regional districts where rural representatives outvote municipal representatives.
Right.
And of course, we have other situations where municipal representatives far outweigh, rural representatives. And that's one of the things that ends up, defining what I call the service personality of, different regions. Regions that are dominated by, adjacent municipalities, tend to have a very urban perspective on the role that they wish their regional district to provide. In other cases, there are where rural representatives dominate. This notion of regional districts as serving to help formulate intermunicipal partnerships is less important than the notion of filling gaps in service provision in rural areas. So that rural urban division is an important one, and I guess I should add that it in certain cases has led to tensions within regional district, that that question of urban regional balance. Most regions have overcome those tensions, but not all.
Right. So we've got 3 questions here now. It's always helpful to have somebody else ask the first one, then everybody else starts coming on side. So Bill Reimer, who's no stranger to most folks involved in rural development and research, has asked, how helpful has this system been for weak or declining communities? And do you have some examples regarding how that might work? Into economic development, I guess.
We have, many, weak or declining communities. It helps because, in British Columbia, and I think I would say more so than in any other province in Canada, the system of regional districts has helped us to sustain a network of quite small municipalities, quite comfortably, because we don't expect all our small municipalities to themselves have to organize the services that they need. They can, turn to the regional district and ask for help in the delivery of services and so on and so forth. So in the case of declining municipalities, if you take a municipality that once was strong and is now depopulating and arriving in a situation where its resources are declining, and it's becoming difficult to sustain the services that they once provided. Those areas have the option of looking to regional districts to step in and take over responsibility for services of that sort. I can't actually give you specific examples of that kind of transaction between a declining municipality and a regional district off the top of my head. But I know, for instance, that the mining community of Grand Isle in northern British Columbia, faced an industry closure probably 2 decades ago. Was once a thriving small municipality, still exists, much smaller than it once was. Unfortunately, I don't know the story of how they have dealt with their servicing issues, but what I can say is that the closure of the mine in the case of Grand Isle did not lead to the disincorporation of the municipality. It still exists, and it's still in reasonably good shape as far as I know.
Okay. We've got a question from Jill Shuswap, PhD candidate from the University of Waterloo. She's conducting research in the Gulf Islands. Wondering if you could comment on the regional district's interface with the Islands Trust.
Well, the Islands Trust is a body. I guess there are other there are people that may not know what the Islands Trust is. It's a body that was created by provincial legislation. It has a jurisdiction over the Gulf Islands in the Strait of Georgia between Vancouver Island and the Vancouver mainland. There are 13 islands, fairly large islands within the Islands Trust. The Islands Trust has a planning mandate. It has a mandate to preserve and protect the islands for the benefit of all British Columbians. It's a locally elected body, but it's not a full-fledged local government. It does not have any servicing responsibility. It does not deliver water, fire, street lighting services, so on and so forth. The regional districts that interface with the Islands Trust, there are several of them, they will be responsible for the most part for local service delivery. So we have a situation where you have one government that is responsible for local services. You have another type of government that is responsible for land use decisions. The relationship can be fraught in some circumstances. In 2 islands in particular, Bowen Island, which is effectively a suburb of, commuter suburb of Vancouver, and Salt Spring Island, which is effectively a commuter suburb of Victoria. The question of municipalization has arisen because certain factions, I guess I would have to say, on the islands at some point had become dissatisfied with the split of responsibilities between regional districts on the one hand and the Islands Trust on the other hand. Bowen Island, about 15 years ago, ultimately decided to municipalize, and Bowen Island has converted itself into a municipality. It has inherited the land use planning responsibilities from the Islands Trust, but it has also inherited the preserve and protect mandate that is built into the Islands Trust mandate in its own right. And so Bowen Island today itself interfaces with the Islands Trust, but has its own responsibility for planning. Salt Spring is actually undergoing a similar reconsideration of its governance status, as we speak. And later on this month, there's actually going to be a vote on Salt Spring Island about incorporation of Salt Spring Island as a municipality. It has a population of 10,000 persons, so it's quite sizable. And we'll have to see what the result is of the forthcoming referendum.
Okay, great. We have one more question, and I think we have time for a quick answer. Will social services, this is from Dominic Funk, will social services, for example, settlement and integration services for newcomers, work well under the regional district system?
Do you know where the questioner is coming from?
No.
What province?
No, I don't.
Social services, our regional districts aren't really involved in social services to any great extent. I'm not aware of any regional district in BC that is engaged in that kind of service, settlement services, immigration services. I'm not sure I could actually name you a regional district off the top of my head that would actually even be interested in undertaking those services. The closest that the regional district system has come to that area of responsibility, which in British Columbia is pretty much centralized under the provincial government, there are a couple of regional districts that have ventured into the housing sphere. Both the Capital Regional District in Greater Victoria and the Metro Vancouver Regional District operate as autonomous entities, housing corporations. But as far as I'm aware, the regional district system does not aspire to move into social services to any degree.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brian. And we're going to move on now to Robert Bish. Robert's presentation is entitled Critical Reflections on the Regional District Model. And Robert, you have, again, about 15 minutes, so take it away.
There we go. Okay, I'm going to divide my presentation into just three discussion areas. I don't have any slides. I just got back from British Columbia. I'm in Florida, getting ready for the next hurricane. I'm going to summarize briefly some major research conclusions that we have on local government, describe how the regional district model fits those conclusions, and a couple of added implications that are especially relevant for very small governments because Newfoundland has a lot of them. And I did tour Newfoundland talking about regional districts about 30 years ago. So I've been to a variety of places there. I'm very fortunate. When I started my study of local government in 1965, we had the results of all of the California studies, which were the discovery of things like contract cities, you know, a city of 50,000 people with 12 employees, everything a shared service with other municipalities, with the county, or with private firms. From the very beginning, I was introduced to the idea that local governments are a system. You don't look at a single government to understand what's going on. California research was repeated in the 70s under Governor Reagan. You know, a bunch of business people came and told the governor, if we reduce the number of municipalities, we'll save money. He appointed a PhD from political science, put together a good team of people. They went out and studied empirically the cost of services and the satisfaction of citizens. Came back and told the governor that the little governments were doing fine. There wasn't any reason to change anything, and he didn't change anything. And California is a very complex system of governments. Of course, there's as many people as there are in Canada, but it is the place in the United States where the most innovation has occurred historically. What we've really learned from research in California, I worked in several other countries as well as different places in the US, is if local government systems are going to work well, the provincial government has to really deal with your social services and services that involve major income redistribution. It is amazing how municipalities can figure out ways to keep poor people out of their jurisdiction if they're responsible for all of the social services. And it turns out that it's very important in complex systems that local governments who make decisions also pay for those decisions, and their citizens get the benefits of those decisions. So in the early California studies, local governments were characterized as consumer co-ops. In other words, a group of citizens form a municipality, and they want to consume certain services. They want fire protection, they may want water, they may want roads, they want police patrol, etc. And so we pay first attention to the demand side from an economist's point of view. And they have to pay for what they get, otherwise you'd be amazed at how much they'd really like if someone else pays for it. And but they have to get the benefits. And that's the way the BC regional district system is designed, as Brian mentioned. So when we're dealing with this multiplicity of organizations in a complex system, each of those councils is looking at the costs as well as the benefits in their decisions. And that's very important. Systems that where you can get big subsidies have not been very stable. We had a situation in education where we had school districts in British Columbia that by spending a nickel could get a 95% provincial match, and needless to say, their expenses went up dramatically and the province had to change the system. This fiscal equivalence, we call it, benefits and costs matched in the decision-making process, are just extremely important. And that doesn't seem to make any difference which country you're in, including countries in South America or Africa, where I've worked, as well as a lot of research from the United States. A second thing that seems to be really important that we have less explicit research on is that the provincial governments or the state governments, or in South America, they have to leave the local governments alone to be responsible for their own decisions. You really do need local knowledge. And where provincial governments have come in and tried to assign services to a second-tier government or a local government, disputes have always emerged and the systems have not been stable in the long run. Two-tier systems where the provincial assignment do not have a successful track record. If I turn to the regional district model, I first had a home in British Columbia in 1968, so I was around a long time before I joined the faculty in 1979. What the regional district did was very interesting. It provided a forum for local governments to make agreements. So as Brian pointed out, it reduced transactions costs. It did more than reduce transactions costs. It began to generate trust among the local officials from the different governments, so they were willing to do more together. And this is really unusual in a sense, that your local government officials are willing to work with one another on a regular, continuing basis. Now, this doesn't mean that regional districts started out and had everything right. I did a review in 1999 where we discovered there was no convenient dispute resolution mechanism. There was no easy way to get out of a service that you'd gotten into that 20 years later you didn't like. So over the 50 years that they've existed, there have been provincial modifications of the legislation, but it's modification of the rules under which the local governments work. It's never telling a local government what to do. And that's really a very important function or process of the provincial government. Set rules that are sustainable, that people feel are fair. It doesn't mean they're not going to fight with one another from time to time. They are human beings after all. But when you have a local government structure that's innovative, that is now 50 years old, they've gotten most of the bugs out. And that's taken some reviews, some royal commissions over time. The biggest problem in a regional district, very frankly, is most citizens don't understand them. Now, the rural citizens understand them because the rural citizens have gone and elected their representative to the regional board. They go to the hearings held by the regional district when there's a land use planning issue, a zoning issue. They may have had to vote in a referendum to have a big capital expenditure like buy a new fire truck. So the rural people tend to understand these pretty well, and I've lived in 2 of them that were very rural. The urban people don't have much understanding because they elect their city council, and then the city council appoints one of its members to go sit on the regional district board. But their planning hearings, their zoning hearings, a lot of their stuff is going to happen as a municipal decision. So they don't quite understand what regional districts do. That can cause problems because I've even observed at one point a minister of municipal affairs who came from a municipality who didn't have the faintest idea how regional district works. And yet he's the minister. We did a couple of studies for him where he was going to create a new system of county government and take over the school districts. And given the budgets of school districts, you can imagine how far that got in the provincial government. Fortunately, he got moved on to something else fairly quickly. But it is a dilemma when citizens don't understand, because they're generally doing 25 or 30% of your services, but indirectly. And another thing I've observed is that, well, we call them regional districts, and they're regional. There was a suggestion they might be called a regional government. They don't fit the model of a government because they're a forum to make agreements. Now, once you've made the agreement, they actually become a government because then they're going to have a budget, collect the money from the different participating members, and administer the service. So they act like a government after the agreement has been made. But most of the agreements that I've looked at are actually sub-regional, not for the entire region. As Brian described, they had sub-regions in that regional district. In Greater Victoria, we have a peninsula to the north and a bunch of western communities to the west. And a lot of the agreements the regional district is administering are for the 3 communities on the peninsula or for the 5 communities in the western area. And then some things, it's the entire region involved. They don't have to do the planning and so on Salt Spring Island because it's a part of the island's trust, but they do have service responsibilities there. One thing that does deserve mention is dealing with small communities, because very small communities are an issue across all of North America, not just British Columbia, not just Newfoundland. In the US, we have farm state communities, whereas people bought trucks and cars and improved roads. Some little communities end up just having some houses with old people living in them. And hopefully they still have a gas station, but they were incorporated municipalities. A couple of things we've observed in the US. One is itinerant city managers, where the city manager is a city of handles 3 or 4 different cities and moves from one to the other. The other thing is what we call the dependent special district, where they continue to have a council, but the county government administers them. And it turns out that looks very much with a form of government in our regional district system that Brian didn't have time to mention, and that's the community commission. You can, in an unincorporated area, form a community commission where you elect 4 or 5, if you include the electoral area director, as a commission. They then make the decisions on local services, both that they're going to pay and how, but the regional district provides the administration. So they don't have employees. They deal with the regional district, and the regional district will have one of its top administrators be their main contact. And then they will organize services for that community as they prefer. But that community no longer has to fill out all the forms for the provincial government, do all the audits for the provincial government, all of the overhead work that you have to do as a municipality. And yet they're making the same decisions on services that a municipality would make. So it is a form of government that I think Brian indicated there were 5 in the province. There's not a lot. We actually considered them on an island I lived in. We had a small island with its own electoral area. Helps to have the minister have a summer home there. And we escaped the island's trust. That was a choice of the minister at the time. We also got a ferry at the time, our own ferry, the most heavily subsidized ferry in the province to the minister's island. But anyway, we ultimately decided not to do the community commission because we had a ratepayers association that met regularly, voted members, and they overlapped with a commission that gave advice on planning and zoning. And so we felt we had good community representation through a volunteer organization that basically made its money by selling alcohol at community dances and didn't need any taxes. So if you look overall at systems that work best, that have been stable, they tend to be very bottoms-up oriented and lots of opportunities for cooperation. You know, we actually have in our regional district a contract municipality where you have a very small staff that contracts out services with other jurisdictions or relies on the regional district and functions quite well. I mean, it's cheap, okay? But it's got a lot of volunteer activity because it's a community. And these small communities can engage in a lot of volunteer activity, keep taxes down, and still pay their way when they want services provided professionally. And so we regard that as very important. And when I went to BC, the province did do one additional thing for small municipalities. It gave all municipalities a small grant to employ a professional. So it wasn't something you could manipulate or spend a lot of time writing grant applications. It simply was automatically you received a grant so you could provide a professional. A later government decided they wanted to get credit for giving out money, so they went back to the old pork barrel type system, which you can spend a lot of time writing grant applications, but if you're MLAs from the wrong party, you probably won't get the grant. But that provision of enough resources to have a professional was a very useful provincial function from my point of view at the time. So overall, when I look at the regional district system in British Columbia, it meets the criterion we'd recommend based on research elsewhere. In fact, it's improved it by reducing transactions costs and having a regular forum where we develop trust with one another to do shared services. And the best research we have in Canada indicates that the capital region, 13 municipalities, have the highest level of shared services of any metropolitan area in Canada. And that allows 13 municipalities where they range from large lot suburban to hobby farms to basically in the big hills that everybody's pretty independent, right down to highly developed places like Oak Bay with very high levels of services, willing to pay very high prices. So you have incredible diversity among the municipalities. It gives you a wide spectrum of places to choose to live and match the lifestyle you want. You'll pay for what you get and get what you pay for. And the regional district allows that to happen with incredible degree of sharing. And I think that's something that is borne out by research done elsewhere in other countries as well as Canada, and far superior to have that adaptability with decisions made at the local level than trying to have some provincial government tell you what to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. That was fantastic. So much overlap with our situation here that it sort of boggles the mind. So, but we'll get into questions in a few minutes. First, we're going to let Dr. Kelly Vaden do her presentation. Kelly, according to my notes, you have 10 minutes. I'm not sure what you did to piss somebody off, but apparently you don't have 15 minutes. You have 10 minutes. And then we've got some 20 minutes or 25 minutes at the end for questions for both Robert and Kelly. And in fact, I guess if somebody has a question they want to go back to Brian with, we can do that as well. So feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A box as Kelly is speaking, and then when she's done, I'll start reading out some of the questions. So Kelly, take it away. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. You are unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I'm really just going to add another case study to the mix here from the Kootenays in BC, and it was interesting to hear the case study that Brian presented from the Columbia Shuswap just to the north. So I'll be speaking about the same general area of the province. And this comes from a national research project, Canadian Regional Development, a critical review of theory, practice, and potentials that I worked on with colleagues from across the country. And particularly, we're working in 4 different provinces, 2 of which you've heard a lot about